Hello everybody. Today we are going to be looking at the topic of God choosing us. The definition of chosen is to be selected as the best or most appropriate choice. And if I think back to being a little girl playing a friendly sports game, they would often pick two very sporty people and they would put them on opposing sides, and then they would let the team captains pick the best or most appropriate players to try and win the game. And if you are sporty, you would have had a different experience to me, but my experience of that process was very traumatic. All of the sporty kids would be picked, and there would be less and less kids in the middle. And when it came towards the end, your only hope was really not to be the last one left and the last one chosen. And then, in the unfortunate event where there might be odd numbers in the team, sometimes one team captain would turn to the other about the last member and say, like, you have them, as if we would do better even if we're one player down because they are so unskilled. If we look in the Bible, in Ephesians 1 verse 4, there's a beautiful verse about God choosing us, and it said, He chose us in Him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before Him. What I love about this is firstly that God chose us. He was not indecisive. He did not make a pros and cons list when it came to us. He does not change His mind. His whole heart chose us before the foundation of the world. What an amazing security we can find in that. And secondly, He didn't choose us because we were holy and blameless. He chose us, and in Him doing so, we become holy and blameless. What a beautiful process that is in our lives as Christians. If I have to think of an example in the Bible of somebody being chosen against all the odds, I would have to think of David. Samuel was sent to Jesse's house to pick the next king of Israel because Saul had turned away from God. And when he gets there, he goes through all of Jesse's sons, and they sounded like big, macho, good-looking men. And once he gets to the end of his sons in the room, Samuel says to God, who have you chosen? And God says, I have not chosen any of these, because I do not look at the outward appearance, I look at the heart. And so Samuel says to Jesse, don't you have any other sons? Because God hasn't chosen any of these ones in the room. And so Jesse says to him, I do have one last son, but... And then he goes on to say the disqualifying factors for why David would not be the best or most appropriate choice. And he says, but he's the youngest son, so he wouldn't be the obvious option, and he's in the field looking after the sheep. And so Samuel calls him in, and as David walks in, God says to him, this is the king that I have chosen, anoint him. And what I love about this story is that against all odds, David is picked. We see that David is not at the window looking in, trying to get noticed. We see that David keeps a good heart in the field as he's looking after the sheep, being faithful with the last thing that he was given to do. We see that David's heart is his main responsibility, to keep his heart in the right place, because as the word says, God looks at the heart, not the outward appearance. And I love the fact that promotion doesn't come from man. Promotion comes from God. And that can be such an encouragement to us in our walk with God. Firstly, we can find encouragement in the fact that we are secure as chosen sons and daughters of God, chosen to be adopted into His family and given all authority that God has given us. And secondly, we can find security in the fact that even if we are overlooked by man, we are not overlooked by God. He sees us. He sees us when we're in the field. Our responsibility is just to be faithful with the last thing that God has called us to do. I pray that today you are encouraged by this message as you walk into everything that God has for you, knowing that we are chosen and we are seen by the Father in heaven.